Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to Progressive Field on a night that it's kind of hard to put a smile on your face if you're a Cleveland Guardians fan. The season's over, and it was a really cool ride that ended when the breaks came to truly a screeching halt. And I guess if you don't win the World Series, then that's probably how it's bound to feel. Everything's good until it's not, and then it just stops. And unfortunately, in Cleveland, we know that heartbreak all too well. Tonight's final score in Game 5 of the ALCS against the New York Yankees was 5-2. And, there's really a couple of easy ways to sum up this entire 2024 ALCS. And it had a lot to do with New York's power and Cleveland playing well, but not well enough. Take a look at the box score from tonight, and it's got, yet another home run from a New York power bat. There were 10 home runs, 10 in this series, and 9 of them in 5 games came from either Giancarlo Stanton, Juan Soto, or Aaron Judge. And they did it off Cleveland's best pitchers in the toughest moments. They routinely worked out of jams where Cleveland left what felt like a million runners on base over the course of the series. Tonight wasn't so bad at only 8. Games 2, 3, and 4 combined, Cleveland stranded a total of 34 base runners. Tonight was, quote unquote, only 8. Usually a pretty sure-handed Guardian defense. And I guess you might say that ultimately let them down. Because the game-winning home run from Juan Soto in extra innings was set up because of a dropped ball in the middle of the infield on what probably should have been a force out at second base. I don't know if Rocchio just was moving too quickly, took his eye off the ball, whatever it might have been. But that kind of did them in. And Hunter Gaddis, he got beat. It's pretty hard to, I know not everybody's deep in the weeds on stats, but it is pretty hard to explain how rare it is for someone like Juan Soto to hit a pitch the way he did, a 37-degree launch angle for a ball to go 404 feet. It is almost impossible for everybody on the planet to generate that kind of bat speed for a ball that's going to spin the way that did. But the Yankees have spent so much money on incredibly talented power hitters that will, give you the kind of heartaches that Cleveland is feeling right now. And it doesn't always work. The Yankees have not won the World Series since 2009, but they're going back to the World Series. And if you look at the difference in this ALCS, it's hard not to say that those 3 guys, Stanton, Soto, Judge, in whatever order you want to put them, it's hard not to point to those guys first. I know Stanton won the MVP, and that's fine. Probably deserved it. But you could have given it to any one of those 3 guys, and I probably wouldn't have argued with you. So the World Series drought in Cleveland continues. 1948 was a long time ago. And, it's hard to define success when you're only looking in the win and loss column. And we'll try to do that somewhere along the way, but tonight's not the night for trying to look at, the positive spin on something. This stings. This hurts. And there's a lot of fans who, not just in the ballpark, there's a lot of people who are dying to see a championship in Cleveland baseball franchise history. And the drought continues, unfortunately. There were a couple of questions asked of Stephen Vogt that I want to bring to your attention. The first was about whether or not he considered walking Giancarlo Stanton. And we put this together in just one clip. So he answers that question, essentially saying, no, he never considered it, and says why. And then he also answered a question that I asked him about, hey, listen, the margins between winning and losing are razor thin. And I wanted to know how difficult it can be for someone in his shoes to be overly analytical of man, what if I would have done one little thing different here or there? So those are the two questions that he answered. Here's what Vogt had to say after the game today.
No, Tanner was dialed. Tanner had struck him out twice. He had him on the ropes. One mistake. That right there, I trust Tanner on him. The way he was throwing the ball, I would not. You give me 100 more times, I'm not putting him on right there. The way I do it is I ask myself what's true. You can write a narrative in your head and spin yourself down a negative path and beat yourself up and second guess and go back. But what's true is you made what you thought was the best decision in the moment, and then you leave it behind. I have a mentor of mine that says, learn the lesson, leave the event. You leave the event behind and you learn everything you can from it. And there's no going back. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone makes good decisions, bad decisions, or they just didn't work. So for me, it's learn.
I like the perspective quite a bit from Stephen Vogt. In his first year managing the Guardians, I have come to admire him quite a bit. I think he's a pretty bright guy. I think he made a lot of really good moves tonight and throughout the course of this season. I think Cleveland baseball has a really, really bright future. Personally, I wouldn't have pitched to Stanton. I think there are a lot of people that were probably, either in this ballpark yelling that or sitting at home throwing their remote through their television, saying, hey, make somebody else beat you. And it's really easy to say that when a home run is hit. I just personally would not have been afraid to have two guys on base for Jazz Chisholm instead of the potential opportunity of letting Stanton maybe beat you. And in this case, tied the game in what eventually sent the game to extra innings and gave them a chance to win. So, hey, listen, anybody can play armchair quarterback. That's just the nature of the beast. And the Guardians know what they signed up for with that. And you live and die by your decisions, and that's it. But it certainly is disappointing when things ultimately work out the way they did here tonight. I've touched a little bit on the offensive thump in that Yankee lineup. And I think what is probably most immediately disheartening from my perspective is just that the other guys in that order played okay, but they were carried by three bats. Rizzo had a couple of decent hits in the series, but was clearly injured and trying to gut through a hand injury that is painful for him. Volpe had a couple good at-bats. I was really, frankly, kind of unimpressed with Chisholm. I know Austin Wells hit a home run in this series. Outside of that at-bat, I have a hard time even remembering his at-bats because I thought he looked lost. I didn't think Verdugo played very well in left field. I just didn't think he played that well. I didn't think John Birdie was very good in this series. I thought the Yankees ran the bases poorly over the course of 5 games. I thought their defense was average at best. I thought they got some good pitching performances for sure. And I certainly give New York credit for regularly escaping, what could be big blow up innings. And you have to do that to win. So I don't want to downplay that part of it. But I just don't look at this Yankee team and think that they are some incredibly special group. And maybe I'm alone in that. I don't know. I don't really care. But that's how I feel. And the fact that Cleveland knew coming into this series how dangerous Soto and Judge and Stanton are. I mean, you go back and watch the at-bat when Soto hit that game-winning home run. Watch his reaction after every pitch. Talk about a professional hitter. He knew what was going to happen. He worked Gaddis exactly the way that he wanted to. And Gaddis threw him a 95-mile-an-hour fastball up in the zone. And as a professional hitter, your job is to make sure you hit somebody else's mistake. And the best way I can sum up this entire series is that those 3 guys made you pay for every mistake pitch, period. And in some cases, like Judge's home run off Clase in Game 3, they're good enough that they can also make you pay for non-mistakes. but they didn't miss when you crack the door open. And that's the difference. And Cleveland is so young. You know, I talked with a lot of the guys in the clubhouse after this game, and there's this, you know, there's this somber attitude of like, man, it's over, right? But the reality is so many of these guys are probably going to factor in Cleveland's roster in 2025. And so they're going to try to use this. It's not, hey, let's start the offseason and spring training and get ourselves back. Every guy to a man in that locker room said, listen, the offseason starts tomorrow. You know, it can't be this long layoff of like what we need to do to get back here. When you're 3 wins away from the World Series and you can taste it, you don't want to stop working. And there is a genuine love for one another in that clubhouse that is pretty hard to come by in professional sports these days. It's a different animal. There are a lot of locker rooms that aren't quite like that, and it just doesn't feel forced. You know, so many of these players came up in the minor league system together and have competed in playoff settings in Lake County and in Akron and in Columbus. And frankly, for as good as Cleveland's farm system has been and currently is, there's no reason to think that they can't keep making runs like this. But when you spend that much time together, there is this closeness that isn't fake among this group. And I think that's both what makes the moment sting for them, but also gives them the faith that, you know, they can find a way to recover from this. But it's hard to admit that in real time and hard to think about that because the pain of coming so close is real for sure. You know, I want to point out quickly how impressive I thought the postseason performances were from Stephen Kwan and Brian Rocchio. You know, Kwan had an amazing first half of the year, and a guy that for a while we were talking like, geez, is he going to hit 400? You know, is this going to be an all-timer of a season from a hitter? We haven't seen somebody hit 400 in a long time. And the reality was it probably isn't ever going to happen again. And he had a good little slump in the middle of the year. And I find it really impressive for somebody who frankly is still as young as Stephen Kwan is, to have the resiliency to stick with his approach and keep working and keep learning. And then when he has an opportunity to go play in the playoffs, be the leadoff hitter, be the guy that can set the table for the offense, to go do what he did in this postseason run was really, really impressive. And the 10 games that he played here in October, I think are going to do a lot for Stephen Kwan's future success. Personally, and what we can dive into this in the offseason, but personally, I'd be surprised if he doesn't win the Gold Glove in left field. I thought he was worthy of that again among left fielders. And frankly, especially the way he contributed in the postseason, like I don't know where Cleveland's head is immediately at as it comes to long-term future, but I know this front office loves Stephen Kwan, and wouldn't surprise me if he is a candidate for a contract extension sooner than later. And I think that makes a lot of folks in Cleveland pretty happy to hear. And then Brian Rocchio, listen, I mean, gosh, there were a lot of times during the regular season that an awful lot of people wanted to run him out of town and just say, hey, enough's enough. It's time to figure out what else you got at shortstop. Sure, I had some of those moments along the way where I didn't really love what I was seeing. But to the coaching staff's credit, they must have seen something with his work ethic and the way he was going through everything, and they wanted to stick with him, and it paid off because Brian Rocchio, in my opinion, was the second best hitter in the playoffs for Cleveland, and I don't know quite how statistically that would get backed up. I think it would. Not necessarily the most clutch hitter, right? I mean, obviously John Kenzie Noel and Lane Thomas and David Fry had some of the big moments, but Brian Rocchio was incredibly consistent during these 10 games between the ALDS and the ALCS here. And I'm really hopeful that that's going to be a big springboard for him, because about 2 months ago, when you started thinking, what might the offseason look like, figuring out shortstop was high on that list. And I don't know that it's so high on the list. He might have played himself into a chance to be Cleveland's starting shortstop in 2025. So we'll see how that growth continues in the offseason. But tip of the cap to Brian Rocchio, who went through winter ball last year and played in some big settings. And, it translated into playoff success on the biggest stage that Major League Baseball has to offer. And that was great to see. We'll get into a lot of the stuff about the bullpen and some of the starting pitching. Tanner Bybee was he was emotional in the clubhouse. Tanner wears his emotions on his sleeve. He is, I think, maybe more than anything else, he just cares. He's incredibly caring, and he works his butt off. And he won't really talk about himself in a high light. Austin Hedges stood in front of every cameraman and camerawoman and reporter in that clubhouse and said, Tanner Bybee is a bona fide ace and is going to have some hardware on his mantle somewhere along the way with the Cy Young. He goes, I don't know if others have said it, but I'll say it. I don't know if personally I'm totally on board with that. I guess I need to look into more what Austin must be seeing from Tanner. But I gave Tanner a lot of credit for the way he went out today. Think about how this game could have gone. First inning, gives up a really hard hit single, and then all of a sudden Soto roasts a double into right center field. And it takes, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, one of the all-time, in StatCast era, all-time great relays to get Torres at the plate. Andres Jimenez, his relay throw home was 94.4 miles an hour. That's the fastest throw on record in his career in StatCast. And it was the fastest relay in StatCast since 2015. It was a perfect throw from Noel to Jimenez and a perfect throw to the plate that gunned down Torres. And that was an electrifying moment in this stadium. But think about what could have been had that inning resulted in the Yankees jumping on the board first. For the fifth game in a row, New York would have scored the first run of the game. Cleveland would be chasing. Maybe Bybee starts to feel a little bit of the heat. Instead, the defense bails him out. He buckles down and gets out of that first inning without giving up a run to give his offense a chance to go get started. And then sent down 10 in a row and really settled into a rhythm. And by the time he got through 5 innings, he was only at 61 pitches. So, I mean, the way that Tanner decided to really buckle down and get after guys in the second, third, fourth, and even into the 5th innings was really impressive. I give him a lot of credit. That was as mature a performance as I think I've seen from Tanner Bybee all year. And the Guardians should certainly be proud of that. I don't know exactly what the future is with Shane Bieber. I think most people in Cleveland sure hope that Shane's back. Shane looked otherworldly in his first 2 starts of the season. And, thought I told you in the middle of April that the Guardians will be 3 wins shy of a World Series berth. With the starting rotation at the end of the year looking the way it did compared to the beginning of the year, and Bieber not being a part of the year at all, I don't know that I would have believed me. Opening day, I mean, think about what this rotation looked like. Bieber and Tristan McKenzie and Logan Allen. Gavin Williams was supposed to be a part of this and was on the shelf for 4 months. Ben Lively was the steadiest part of the rotation all year long. There was so much change in that rotation throughout the course of the year. And the bullpen, I mean, in spring training, Trevor Stephan, James Karinchak get shut down, and you don't really know exactly what you got. Cade Smith's the last guy to make the roster. And Cade Smith turns out to be arguably the most valuable, unheard of guy in baseball. He's been heard of now, that's for sure. He was almost as good as Clase was during the regular season. Good for Clase for getting it done tonight when he was called upon. He figured it out, and he had to do it against Judge and Stanton and Chisholm. He worked his way through it. Good for him. So, there are certainly some positives to take away, but it stinks. It's a tough night. And, Cleveland will pick itself up and start the offseason and try to figure out how to move forward and what they need to prioritize and how they can get a little bit better. But the hardest part about a night like tonight is you immediately think to yourself, where can you be better the next time around? And we're talking, it's that much better. You feel like you got the right guys on the team. You feel like you got the right voices in the room. I guess I'll leave with this. David Fry made a comment at the end of the night he said, I don't care if Austin Hedges doesn't get a base hit all year, not one hit, he'd be underpaid because of what he means to this clubhouse and all the things that he does behind the scenes and how he preps with us and what he means to this team. That's an impressive compliment for sure. And I know there were a lot of people in the offseason last year that were going, oh boy, Austin Hedges is back. Like, there's our big thunderous bat. Well, 2 years ago, Austin Hedges meant a lot to this team. Last year he left, and this clubhouse missed him dearly. This year he comes back, and they're singing his praises again. There's something there. And, I don't know exactly what his future looks like, but he sure has made it clear how much he loves Cleveland, the people here, the city, and, you have to trust the people that he's working with on a daily basis. I hope Austin continues to be a part of the Guardians organization for a while. All right, that wraps up a tough night. 5-2, the final score tonight. Cleveland just didn't have a very good year against the New York Yankees, and ultimately ran into a Yankees team that hit more home runs than they did in the postseason, and that was good enough to punch their ticket to the World Series coming up here next week. Plenty more coverage on the Guardians as we get into the offseason and try to write a bit of an autopsy on what 2024 looked like. I certainly hope that you'll continue to follow me on social media at Brendan Gulick 22 on Twitter or X. And we'd like to do a lot of this kind of content for you on our YouTube channel. It's Cleveland Guardians on SI. It's really easy to find on YouTube. Would certainly appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel there so we can keep doing this kind of stuff for you. And talk about the Guardians as we get into the heart of the winter and figure out what 2025 might look like. Spring training's not terribly far away in the grand scheme of things, given that we're already into the later part of October here. And again, for all the latest written content on the team, si.com/MLB/Guardians. We'll have trade rumors. We'll have free agency signings that we think could be good fits for the team. Certainly have all the latest news and info on the team, and try to give you the best beat that we can on what's going on here with the Cleveland Guardians. It's been a fun year. 92 wins, man. I don't think too many people expected that when we got started in spring training. And Cleveland ultimately gave this city quite a ride and ultimately fell just a little bit short. So thanks for joining us throughout the playoffs. Certainly appreciate that. And can't wait to see you again here coming really soon. And then certainly as we get for the 2025 season with spring training. Again, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll see you soon. ALCS Game 5 final. Yankees 5, Guardians 2.